Friday, Baylor College of Medicine and friends of Baylor. What can I say? What a week. I'm completely confused. I don't know about the rest of you, but after all of our thinking about the CDC should loosen things up, they just said throw away your mask. But not throw away your mask because follow local rules. And then this governor said we don't have any rules. So throw away your mask, follow rules, no rules. Well, but wait, the county just changed from red alert, where we're on an apocalyptic warning, to we're now down to orange. I have no idea what any of this means. So if you're like me, I have no idea what to do. But I'm going to try and help you. I'm going to try and figure out what's a reasonable human to do, because we are left once again on our own. We have to figure out how to behave normally without any advice from anyone. So let's give it a shot. It's, no one has any perfect answers, but I'll do my best. So let's first talk about the world. Oh my Lord. India's a mess, but it's getting better. It couldn't get worse almost. And now if you look at the real hotspot, South America, Argentina is going crazy. Brazil is still bad. So, the epidemic is looking like it's kind of turning into three different parts. There's the completely messed up world of India and South America. There's the ones that got their acts together because the cities have had a high enough vaccination rate. Tel Aviv is doing well, New York City, LA, they're doing very well. And then there's a bunch of cities chugging along. It's sort of where they've been. Toronto, Paris, Santiago, Houston, and we're sort of in between. We're doing a little bit better, but we're not getting as better as some of those bigger cities that have had a higher vaccination rate. So why is this? Can we explain what's going on? Well, I think it's actually pretty easy to see what's going on. If you look at the inflection point right here, when things started improving in the U.S., it was when we hit a 30% vaccination rate, when 30% of our population was vaccinated. On April 15th, that was when things started to improve. And it was very similar to what was going on in Texas when we hit about 30%. We are now at 37%, which is great, but a while back we were at 30%. Well, let's look at what happened in Israel. They hit 30% right on January 22nd. And remember we said 2 weeks after that is when you're fully vaccinated? Well, exactly 2 weeks after that, February 7th, boom, dropped like a stone. So it's really not hard to figure out what's going on. When you get to about 30% of the population, when you have about a 25 or 30% prevalence of the disease, that's about 60%. And if you'll recall, I have been saying this from the beginning, herd immunity is a calculated amount based on the R naught value of the virus, which when we had it originally at 2.7 was 60%. When you hit 60%, and what does herd immunity mean? The virus begins to have trouble replicating even if we don't follow public health measures. And that's what you saw in Israel when it hit 30%. That's what we saw in the United States when we hit 30%. And that's what we're seeing in Texas when we hit 30%. Now, it's not because it helps. It's because we have 60% protection because 30% of the population has been infected already. So it really is at that 60% level that we are achieving herd immunity. We're seeing the benefit of that. That doesn't mean we're all out of the woods, but it means we're seeing the benefit. That explains why the numbers are falling. Now, if you look in the TMC, finally hospitalization have dropped under 100 a day on a weekly average, so we're hit like in the 70s, which is great. So what can we say? How can we behave? We're on our own, as I said, to make personal decisions. And if you think about it, every decision you make to get a vaccine or wear a mask in public or indoors, those are kind of risk-benefit calculations. So let's think about how we do risk-benefit calculations. First of all, how bad is this COVID virus? We know it's pretty bad, but really, relative to other things. So flu kills about 25,000 people a year. It can be bad, 50 to 60,000 in a really, really bad year. And that case fatality rate, in other words, how many people die who actually get it, is about 0.1%. As you'll recall, we talked about COVID being 0.5%, the UK variant 0.9%, in India 1.1%. So that's 10 times worse than the flu. Flu's bad, it's 10 times worse. But, that's not really a valid comparison because that's not how we calculate deaths from flu. The way seasonal flu is calculated, it used to be that they calculated just like we did with COVID, which is I have a diagnosis of a case, that's a flu case. But, the thing is, states are not required to report individual flu illnesses. Influenza rarely is on a death certificate, and many times people die from flu 1 to 2 weeks after they get it because they get secondarily infected. So the CDC figured out early on reported deaths is not a good way to do it. So they changed, and what they started doing is looking at excess deaths. So we follow deaths per month and per year, all thing over many, many years, many, many decades. And all of a sudden it bumps up in, a seasonable time when flu is around. And those excess deaths are actually how we calculate the number of deaths. Now that was the way we did for many, many years, but that is always in retrospect. You have to go back, how many deaths happened last year compared to other previous years. So they've changed now to try to do real-time surveillance with something called the FluServe network, where they do it's basically an algorithm. They sample various hospitals throughout the country, look at number of deaths that they have on by flu, and then do a mathematical model and prediction so they can do it real time. But the real way to do it is excess mortality. So let's look at excess mortality. Has anyone tried to do that with COVID? Turns out they have. Remember IHME, the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation at University of Washington, has tried to calculate what was the excess deaths due to COVID. And it's not so easy. And I'll explain why it's not so easy. Turns out you can either overestimate or underestimate. So if you think about it, some people died just because they didn't get care. They were afraid to go to a hospital or see their doctor, and they passed away. But those don't really count as COVID deaths. You have to actually take into account for that. This has been a tough year, so a lot of mental health disorders, increase in opioid use, alcohol use. How do you take that into account? And then the other thing is people haven't been traveling around, so traffic deaths, dramatic reduction in traffic mortalities. And also because we're all wearing masks and staying away from each other, there's been a real reduction in viruses from like influenza or respiratory syncytial virus. So they took advantage of Lily, will you stop it? They took advantage of accounted for all of that and tried to come up with what really is the excess mortality over the past year for COVID. Worldwide, it's double what we think. So they estimated 7 million deaths worldwide. The rest of when the WHO is estimating 3.24 million. So over twice. What about in the United States? Well, they estimated almost 910,000 deaths versus 574,000 deaths. So almost twice as bad as what we think. So when we start making decisions and we go, oh, it's not so bad, it's only 5 to 10 times worse than the flu. It's actually 20 times worse than the flu. And it caused 1 million deaths, not a few deaths, 1 million deaths. So when you start thinking about the risk, it is very, very bad disease and nobody wants it. And look, what's the risk of a vaccine? Well, if you look at Pfizer and Moderna, 273 million doses given. There have been 4,647 reported deaths around the time of the vaccine. Every single one of those, is reviewed by a physician, and they try to attribute whether or not it was a complication of the vaccine. 0 have been attributed to the vaccines. In contrast, with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, 28 cases have been attributed to the vaccine, and those are those rare cases of blood clots with a reduction in platelet count. So when you're trying to think about it, 1 million deaths versus 283 million vaccines and no deaths, that's a pretty good risk-benefit ratio. So I don't understand why people don't want to get vaccinated. The good news is hesitancy is falling. There's a recent Kaiser survey. The people who are saying, I'm not going to get vaccinated over my dead body, which they could die from this, but it's down to 13%, and more people are willing to get vaccinated. 32% have been vaccinated, 30% are as soon as possible, and 17% are wait and see. So already that's 62 plus 17, that's 79%, almost 80%. So we're going to get where we need to be. And for those 13% who don't want to get vaccinated, good luck. We'll take care of you when you're admitted to the hospital.
Another good thing is we did a survey, Kaiser did a survey on kids, or parents of kids. And they're saying, how likely are you to get them vaccinated right away? Well, 31% they'll get vaccinated right away. 24% say that they are just going to wait and see how it's going, but are willing to get it. And 8% have already been vaccinated. So that's 63%. We throw in 63% of kids, we're going to get to that number for herd immunity very quickly. So let's get back to the CDC recommendations. It says you can resume activities like before. I wouldn't do that. I don't know what they're saying. I wouldn't do that. And I'll tell you why. You can still get sick. I wouldn't do that. And it's not fair. It's not fair to the families who can't get vaccinated but want to get vaccinated, or everybody who's got kids that aren't eligible to be vaccinated. It's not fair to them that everybody else throw your mask away and put at risk that whole population. That to me is ridiculous. Then it says you can resume activities except where required by federal, state, and local, tribal, or territorial laws. Well, in our state, we don't have any rules. We're not allowed to make rules. So we're not allowed to make those rules. So we have to make our own personal rules. The good news is you can travel in the U.S. as you want. That's good. And you can travel abroad, assuming they'll let you in. Now, it's good news, I think today or yesterday, Europe has decided to open up its borders. So my sister can finally get to Italy. Finally. Maybe. We're not sure, but maybe. And then, of course, if you've been around with somebody and you've been vaccinated, but you've been around with somebody who has COVID, you don't have to actually isolate. So why am I not? Why am I just throwing off my mask and jumping into a crowd of 45,000 people? Well, until the viral burden is lower, until we, right now only half the population has been vaccinated. Until we get like 60, 70% vaccinated, and the case number in our community is not 380, but it's 50 or 40. So very few people that you run into or have a chance of getting infected. I'm not doing it, and I'll tell you why. There's still breakthrough infections. So, yeah, the vaccine is 95% effective, but there have been 9,245 people reported who've been vaccinated thoroughly and got infected. And there have been 132 deaths in people who've been vaccinated. So why would you even take a risk in a really bad disease if you don't know that people have been vaccinated? So imagine going to a group of 100, which I would feel uncomfortable in, where no one's wearing a mask, and only half of them have been vaccinated. And in that group of 100, where the prevalence of is about 30%, you figure, there's going to be 15, 20 of those people who are probably infected. Are you going to bump into 15 or 20 people in a group of 100? Probably. So why take the chance? So indoors, unless you know that they're vaccinated, I'd wear a mask. And outdoors, you're okay. Outdoors, I feel perfectly comfortable. And look at the New York Yankees. I'm from New York. Let's go Yankees. But the fact is, the New York Yankees, they're all vaccinated, right? They had to be vaccinated. And 8 members of the New York Yankees staff got infected. They're all vaccinated. One person who wasn't, vaccinated, was sick, came in and infected 7 or 8 of them. Now, the reason they know is because they started screening people. Well, it shows that even vaccinated people can carry the virus. They weren't sick. None of them got sick, but there were 8 positives on the staff. That just shows you. The virus is still moving around and can be transmitted. What would be the easiest thing? Israel, man, I love them. They have a little confirmation, walk around with a sheet of paper or on your cell phone, says, I've been vaccinated. But of course, we're not allowed to show that. That's a violation in the United States. But think how easy it is. Here's the vaccinated section for a restaurant or theater. Just show your vaccine status. But that would be too easy. And probably that would be viewed as taking away our personal freedoms. Anyway, back to Dimmitt. You remember I tell you Dimmitt County every single time? What's going on with Dimmitt County? So I wanted to find out. So Dimmitt County, you may not know this, but was established in 1858. It was named after a former Pennsylvania adventurer named Philip Dimmitt. He moved to Texas from Pennsylvania before the Texas Revolution, and he fought bravely in the Texas Revolution and fought for Texas independence. And of course, he never received credit. So when they were naming the county, they decided to name it Dimmitt County. they misspelled it. His name has 2 T's. Yeah, but the way they spelled Dimmitt is Dimmit. So I think we're close to celebrating him.
And so what's going on in Dimmitt? Well, not a lot. It's a cattle ranching area, and they grow some pecans. But most importantly, it's known to be the highest home of local javelinas. Now, javelinas, these are great. These are the strangest looking animals in the absolute. They're just so weird, and they're not pigs. People confuse them for pigs, but they're absolutely not pigs. They're in the peccary family, and they have this little kind of ring around their neck, so you can spot them in case you see a wild pig. Those feral pigs and hogs are very nasty. These guys are friendly. And they're actually indigenous to Texas. The feral hogs are, an invasive species. These guys live mostly in Central America, Mexico, and South America. And the very northern part of their range is Dimmitt County. And so Dimmitt County, for a long time, has been the home for javelinas and a place where you can get javelina skins. And thank you very much. And I'm very happy to tell you that I have a javelina skin that was given to me by the King Ranch. So, but they're in the peccary family. They are not hogs, so never confuse them with wild hogs. That's what's going on in Dimmitt County. So I want to end by a bunch of shout-outs this week. First of all, I want to give my best wishes and happy birthday to Maria and Maybelle Longy. Congratulations. I want to thank Robert Underbrink and the King Ranch for my javelina skin. That was a big thing for me. Next week, I think we're going to do a Q&A because my sister's driving me crazy. A lot of questions. So next week will be Q&A for questions that have accumulated over the last month. And sometimes when you're really confused about what to do scientifically and what should we do about these vaccines, should I get vaccinated or not, the best thing to do is ask kids because kids are smarter than we are. So we're going to end with some kids giving some commentary on vaccines. So have a great weekend, and I can't wait to see you next week, and I will be there with Q&A next week. Bye-bye.
A lot of responses from people.
I really want to have a normal high school year. I just want everything to be able to go back to normal, and I think it's very important to get vaccinated.
Through science, we know that everything will be safe. There will be some side effects. Maybe getting vaccinated outweighs the risks of the side effects.
I'm looking forward to being able to hang out with my friends, and for once everywhere goes back to normal, being able to participate in musicals and theater.
I think it's just fantastic. We're really happy for that to return.